All right, I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order, please. The Reverend James Calderazzo, are you here this evening? Yes, you are. Fantastic. If you'd come up and lead us in the, or start off with the prayer. Thank you very much. Folks out there, if you have blue cards, make sure you turn them in. If anyone would like to speak tonight on an agenda item, go ahead and fill one of the blue cards out, which are available at the back of the room, and just bring them up to our clerk at the front. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start off the evening with the special public hearing for the fiscal year 2018 millage rate and budget. Let's see, Jeff, our attorney.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I'd like to pull something off the agenda tonight, the consent agenda, if we could.
Okay, sure. When we get down to agenda approval, we'll go ahead and... Do
we do it now or wait until we get to there?
Yeah, let's do it after the public hearing.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure.
Absolutely. Thanks.
We're here on the second reading of ordinance number 17-25-CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin of Okaloosa County, Florida, adopting the final levying of ad valorem taxes for the City of Destin for fiscal year 2018 and providing for an effective date. And this is a public hearing, and I believe Mr. Farmer did pass out a corrected agenda item packets that have the correct recommended motion just for the council's edification. So.
City Manager?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to have Mr. Farmer explain the correction that he made, please.
The only change from the first reading is that I noticed that the rollback rate was incorrectly stated in the original agenda item, but the rollback rate for this year's ad valorem taxes is 1.6738 mils, which is greater than the current adopted millage rate of 1.615. Other than that, everything is the same.
Mr. Farmer, I understand this does not affect first reading.
Not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing. If anyone from the public would like to speak on this item, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll be happy to call you forward. Oh, okay, with no comment from the public. First up this evening, Councilman Dixon.
That was for the change on the, yeah, sorry.
Alrighty, no problem. Councilman Braden.
Thank you. I'll make the recommended motion, move that the council adopt ordinance 17-25 17-CN on second reading, adopting a final millage rate of 1.615 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 1.5615.
Rodney, you read the wrong motion. The handout.
I move that the City Council adopt ordinance 17-25-CN on second reading, adopting a final millage rate of 1.615, which is less than the rollback rate of 1.6738 mils.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, if not, go ahead and place your... Okay, I was told to use the thing I have here, but it's waiting for mine down there.
We'll fix that.
And Mr. Foreman, I think we're waiting on a vote from you. No worries. Okay, it is a unanimous yes. It was a little bit hard to come by, but yay, moving forward. Okay, next up we have the second reading of ordinance 17-26-CN, adopting the fiscal year 2018 budget. Mr. Burns?
Ordinance number 17-26-CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin making appropriations for certain expenditures, expenses, capital improvements, and certain indebtedness of the City of Destin, Florida for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2017 and ending September 30th, 2018, and providing for an effective date. And we're here on second reading, and this is a public hearing.
Okay. City Manager?
Yes, ma'am. There have been no changes made since the first reading of the ordinance. If you have any questions, either myself or Mr. Bragg Farmer will be happy to answer them.
Excellent. Okay, this is a public hearing. If anyone in the audience would like to speak on it, please raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. Okay, moving on to Council. Councilman Morgan, you're first up.
I move that council adopt ordinance 17-26-CN on first reading to provide for a balanced budget for fiscal year 2018 and schedule the second reading on September 18th, 2017.
Something's wrong here.
Yep. I know. Not in my packet, though.
Something's wrong here. This is the first
the
reading
documents.
wordings.
I move that council adopt ordinance 17-26-CN on second reading to provide for a balanced budget for fiscal year 2018.
Second.
Okay, any further comment or commentary from council? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. The screen's blank. Ta-da! Can we accept an... Okay, we're going to go ahead and do a roll call vote since obviously we are locked up here. So starting down at the end, Councilman Morgan. Councilman Destin?
Yes.
Okay, myself, yes. Councilman Marlar?
Yes.
Councilman Foreman? Yes. Councilman Dixon?
Yes.
And Councilman Braden?
Yes.
Okay, it is a unanimous yes. And let's see, moving on, we've got the agenda approval. Does anyone want to pull an item from the consent agenda at this time?
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun earlier, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, but yes, I do. I wanted to pull, if you would, item K off of here for further discussion.
Okay, anyone have anything else to pull from consent? Okay, seeing none. Is the agenda then fully approved by council? Do we need a vote on this or no?
Yes.
Okay, if we can go ahead and take a vote then, we'll do a roll call for this. Agenda approval, Councilman Morgan. Yes. Councilman Destin.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Councilman Marlar.
Yes.
Councilman Foreman. Yes. Councilman Dixon.
Yes.
Councilman Brady.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous yes. Approval of the agenda, pulling item, let's see, K. All right, so moving forward, do I have an approval of the minutes from June 19th, 2017? Second, do I hear one? Second. Okay, so let's go ahead. Any discussion on that, or shall we go ahead and vote? Give it a try? Okay. Nothing popping up. There we go. All right. Okay, now I've voted, and it says locked where my name normally would be, but it's at the top. And it says still voting. You want me to vote on the other one too, or is that going to mess things up? That didn't work either. All right, unanimous +1. Okay, I don't know what's going on tonight. Thanks for y'all's patience with this. Okay, we don't have any proclamations, recognitions, or special presentations this evening, so let's move on to public comments. I have one blue card. Do we have any others, Clerk? Okay, so only one card, and this is for an item 6. Do you want to hold off until item 6, or would you like to go ahead and speak now? Mr. Russell? Now? Okay, fantastic. You can go ahead and come on up.
Well, actually, Mayor Pro Tem, blue cards are for all items other than those under number 6, and number 6 is as it's described on the agenda right there, so that would be
So
part
go
of
ahead and wait until 6?
Wait till 6, yeah.
If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and wait till 6 then. That way it's right there when we discuss it, so it's fresh. Thank you, sir. All righty then. So, public hearings, we're going to go ahead and start with the second reading of ordinance. Wait, nope, I'm skipping something. City manager reports, resolution 17-39. If you would go ahead with that, city manager.
Yes, ma'am. This is for the 2017-18 interlocal agreement with Okaloosa County for beach and boardwalk operations and maintenance. Back in May of this year, we submitted a funding application in the amount of $436,770 to the Tourist Development Council to be used towards maintaining the city's beach parks, beach accesses, and the harbor boardwalk. Then on May 5th, the TDC voted to approve our application and the budgeted items that we had presented. It has gone to final approval by the Board of County Commissioners for their fiscal year budget, and as part of the agreement, the city is required to enter into an interlocal agreement with the Okaloosa Board of County Commissioners. So what you have before you is the interlocal agreement that we are required to sign in order to receive the TDC funding that we applied for and was approved by the TDC. And attached to the backup is a copy of the budget that we did present. So we would just ask at this time if the council would authorize the agreement for the waterfront access maintenance and capital improvements on behalf of the city.
Okay, anything further from staff? Okay, Councilman Dixon?
Yes, I'll make the recommended motion. I move that the City Council approve Resolution 17-39, authorizing the mayor to execute the interlocal agreement with Okaloosa County for waterfront access maintenance and capital improvements on behalf of the city.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion by council? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. And it is unanimous. Okay, City Manager, next up, Resolution 17-40.
Yes, this is for a continuing services contract for miscellaneous right-of-way median landscape maintenance. And historically, along the US Highway 98 corridor from Marla Bridge to the Walton County, also on Mountain Drive, Legion Drive, Main Street, Airport Road, and Matthew Boulevard. The City of Destin maintains the right-of-way, or would like the right-of-ways maintained to a higher level of service than is provided normally by the Florida Department of Transportation. So we have an arrangement where we will then go ahead and do the maintenance ourselves. We do not have the resources to do that, so we contract out every year for a continuing services contract. And this is a new company that we are asking to contract with. It has gone through the bid process. We solicited bids from qualified contractors, and the bid committee reviewed all of the bid submissions, and we found that Gulf Coast Environmental Contractors were the lowest and most responsive bidder. They submitted a bid for $180,000, and we would ask that the council would approve this contract at this time.
Okay, staff, anything further? No? Council? I do have a thought, actually. Is this something that we have allocated funds for in the past? Yes. And was it the same amount in the past?
It's about $7,000 cheaper.
Okay, excellent. Council, anybody else have comments? I don't see anything lit up. Okay.
I move that City Council adopt Resolution 17-40, awarding the miscellaneous right-of-way median landscape maintenance contract to Gulf Coast Environmental Contractors, Inc. for fiscal year 2018, and authorize the city manager to execute the contract. I do have a comment, if I could, please, after.
Do I hear a second? Second. Okay. Mr. Dixon, and then Councilman Morgan.
I hope with this contract that we are making this company check the sprinkler heads. I see, I'm driving down the road early in the morning, I see about half of the sprinkler heads on Airport Road especially that are not working or shooting straight up in the air. So I do know that we have a lot of cars that run over them right there, but they need checked often. And the reason they do is because it's obvious whenever the sprinkler's not working correctly, the grass dies. So please, with this contractor, let's make sure that we have a check on that and make sure that they fix the heads as they are broken.
Yes, sir. Our park superintendent is here in the audience and has heard you, and we will make sure that we do that.
Excellent. Councilman Morgan?
How long has Brightview been doing this? Brightview's our current one, right? Our current contractor?
Let me ask Mr. Andrew Fett to please come up and answer your questions. He's our park superintendent.
New park supervisor. Brightview's been doing it, I think, since 2011. And they were just been on a continuous, I think, a 4-year plus one continuous after that.
Okay.
At about $187,000 a year.
Other than the sprinkler heads that Tuffy mentioned, I think they've done a pretty good job. So just.
Yeah, and policing for trash has been a big problem too.
Absolutely.
Just since I've had this position, I've had to call them quite a bit to police the properties.
Okay, thanks.
Do you know what sort of schedule they're going to be on to mow? Because one of the things I notice is the grass tends to get really, really tall, as in 3 feet or so before it's mowed.
When we drew up this new bid, I made a complete scope of service for all of the general maintenance, such as the mowing, the edging, and blowing, and all that to be done on a weekly basis. And as far as the sprinklers go, under the new agreement, they'll also have to fill out a weekly report. And they'll send that in to me and copy it to Lance Johnson with all the progress and everything they've done from the week before, not only contractually, but uncontractually too. This way we know that whether they've been working on the sprinklers or not.
Right, okay. Thank you. Any further questions for staff or anything else from council? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move to the vote. Eventually. There we go. All right, I give up. I'm going to have to use the other one. Okay, it is a unanimous yes. Moving on, legislative priorities. City Manager?
Yes, ma'am. Last year, we had the City Council adopt legislative policy priorities that we are then able to share with our legislative delegation and also other committee members at Tallahassee during session. What we've done with this is that we have used the legislative policy priorities from the League of Cities as were adopted at their recent annual conference in August. And there's also some others that are unique to the city of Destin. And if the council is satisfied and approves these legislative priorities and adopts them, then we will make sure that we share them, and then also any opportunity that we have, we let these priorities be known to the legislators in Tallahassee during session.
Excellent. Council, discussion. I see Councilman Foreman, you're up first.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I make the recommended motion. I move to approve the City of Destin 2018 legislative policy priority list for the overall benefit of the citizens and businesses of the City of Destin.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion from council? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move to the vote. And it is unanimous as well. City Manager, announcements.
None at this time, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay, then. So now we will have first reading of ordinances not requiring public hearings, in which we have none this evening. So we'll go ahead and move to the public hearing. Let's start off with Attorney Burns. Lead us off.
Ordinance number 17-27-CC, an ordinance of the City of Destin regulating city cemeteries, providing for authority, providing for purpose, providing for modifying City Code Section 7-23, burial plots and mausoleum niches, Section 7-28, tombstones, monuments, and markers, providing for incorporation into the Code of Ordinances, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And we're here on second reading, and this is a public hearing.
Okay, City Manager, anything further?
Yes, just to briefly recap to where we are today. On the August 21st meeting, staff was directed to make revisions to our existing cemetery regulations, designating one section of the new cemetery, or otherwise the Phase 2 cemetery, to allow tombstones, markers, or other monuments. That was approved on first reading by the council at September 6th. At this point, nothing has changed to the ordinance since the last time. Anything regarding the fee schedule actually is in the item that was pulled by Councilmember Dixon. This just changes the wording to allow the tombstones and other monuments to be in the new cemetery, and then the resolution will address the actual fee schedule for purchase.
Okay, this is a public hearing. I do have the blue card from Mr. Dino Russell. Now, if you'd like to come on up and speak, please, sir. And if you wouldn't mind, please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Dino Russell, 626 Mimosa Street, Destin, Florida. In regards to the tombstone, I don't agree with what y'all were saying. It would be increased to $2,000 a year from $1,050. When I go out there, and I get friends and relatives there, and when I go out there, I'm seeing the skid marks, you know, burnout marks on my loved ones' grave tombstones, where the lawnmowers are going over, the tombstones are all chipped up and degraded. You know, would you want your loved ones' headstones degraded like that? Now, you know, when I go out there and see the flags desecrated like that, you know, any other place, we'd be thrown in jail for doing that to our flags. I see them run over, you know, it's just a disgrace in our graveyard out there when I go out there and see this. So I don't agree with the $2,000 a year increase or for the tombstone. I can see a couple of hundred. But if we're going to do that, I think we need to take and give driver's ed, you know, to our maintenance people, you know, because I don't agree and I don't appreciate going out there seeing tire marks all over my loved ones' gravestones. You know, go out there. Let me take y'all out there. I've got a 4-door dually out there. I'll load every one of y'all up right now. Let's go out there to the graveyard, take a look, and let me show you what I see. You know, it's uncalled for. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you for your comments, and I'm sorry to hear about your experience. Just to clarify, the ordinance that we're going over right now will allow or either disallow, depending on council vote, the actual straight up and down, or I guess we could say the vertical monuments. The resolution, as we call it, I guess, or the ordinance that deals with perhaps raising the cost will come in the item that Mr. Dixon pulled later. We'll be discussing that item. So anything further? Again, this is a public hearing. Yes, ma'am? And again, please state your name and address for the record.
Hey, I'm Carrie Harbarger, 413 Spring Lane. I want to thank y'all for hearing me again, but I also want to throw an idea out. I'm not opposed to creating a committee if it comes down to that part of the negotiations to help with the maintenance of our cemetery. I wouldn't be opposed to running the committee or saying just food for thought.
It's a good idea. Thank you so much. Anything further? Okay, I'll go ahead and turn to council. Do I hear a motion or discussion?
Can I?
Sir, go ahead, Mr. Dixon.
I want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about here, and the fact is that if we adopt this, we're going to still go back and talk about the costs of this under item K that I pulled. So basically, you know, to go ahead and get that part of it rolling, if I could find the motion, I'd make it. But anyway, if anybody else finds it, go ahead.
Councilman Braden, you're up next. Did you want to make the motion or have discussion?
I have some discussion.
I'll make the recommended motion.
Okay.
Motion to adopt ordinance 1727CC on second reading.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Dixon seconds. Discussion from Councilman Braden.
Thank you. That $2,000 for a plot, it's a one-time fee, is it not? That's not $2,000 every year. And then my second question is, the amount that we came up with the $965 to $1,900 annually, what is that based off of? Is that based off 10 years, 5 years, 20 years?
That's an annual estimate of the increased maintenance based upon the change of equipment that would need to be used and the additional man-hours. They wouldn't be able to use the riding mowers. There would be more time using the edgers and the push mowers. It was an estimate by staff based upon the salaries of the maintenance people and the estimated additional time that it would take to do that.
Well, I was under the impression that how we came from went from 1,000 to 2,000 was the additional cost it was going to take to maintain that.
Yes, but that's for 1 year. The city, unlike other cities, not only just surrounding us, but all over Florida, most of them have perpetual maintenance funds that after the plot is purchased, then there's also a fee for the perpetual maintenance fund, which goes into an account, and Mr. Farmer would have to give you the particulars of that type of fund account, but then the maintenance costs, additional maintenance costs, are offset by that. We don't have a perpetual maintenance fund. We do everything in-house from our normal general fund budget. So the fact that we would need additional time and effort spent to caretake around the monument stones, we estimated an increased cost for the plot, which you're right is a one-time cost fee. It no way would take care of 30 to 50 to 100 years of maintenance, but it's something additional to help offset what we already know that we're going to have to spend.
Okay, here's my concern. We're easing into a discussion that has to do with the pulled item from the consent agenda. So if it's okay with council, if we could hold off on the discussion of fees until we actually come to that item, and then that way we can dig more deeply into the costs and the fees. Is that okay with council?
I have a question.
Okay, Councilman Dixon?
It does have fees in this ordinance.
Right, but the cost of the plots is what specifically.
It does have cost of the plots in the ordinance. And I just want to make sure that when we do go back, and if we do change the K that I've asked to be pulled, that those numbers will change, because they are here in the ordinance. I'm reading it right now. Am I right?
Yeah, you can do that. If y'all change it on K, we can go back and change it.
Excellent point. Okay, so can someone make that notation so that when we get back to this item K, that is so addressed? Yes?
I would just assume we have this item somehow, the wording changed on the motion to be able to take the cost out of this to put it back in later on, because the way we adopt it, if we adopt it, it's going through with these costs in it. And this is the second reading.
Mr. Burns, can you give us some guidance, please?
We could change the motion like that, Mr. Dixon, but the ordinance I have in front of me doesn't have any fees in it. Are you looking back farther in the packet to the?
I'm looking on page 247 of our packet.
That's the agenda. That's the agenda cover sheet.
Oh, that's the agenda cover sheet. I think they melded them together and kind of mixed the discussions in the cover sheet, but the ordinance itself doesn't have the fees. Those are set by resolution of the council.
All right, so it does have it in this wording, but it's not in the ordinance.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on the monuments? Oh, Councilman Marlar.
Having a lot of relatives who are residents of the cemetery, my question is, the last time that I had to have a stone put there, I thought we had a regulation of how this is to address Mr. Russell's problem, and I think some of the other complaints, that they had to be a certain level in the ground. In other words, I think it's like level with the with the turf. And I think that might be something, and I think what happens over the years, they sink, they move around and stuff. I'm trying to see how we can possibly, and I don't know if this comes under the ordinance or not, but we need to look at the maintenance of making sure that whatever the regulation is, if there is one, that the stones, the flat stones, I think is what most of the complaints are about as far as the chips on there, that we have a certain level that they be buried at and the lawnmower be at a certain level also. Is that part of this, or can I just get that checked into?
Section 7-28, Section A, sir, gives very detailed information about the actual stone, how it must be leveled and aligned. It gives, inches wide and width. So yeah, 7-28A gives all of that information that you're looking for.
Okay, yeah, I've got it now. But the problem exists is that's fine when we first put the stone in the ground, but we don't have do we have a way of going backwards and checking it later on, like, annually checking? I know that sounds a little trifle in some ways, but at the same time, that's what we want to do to make, to keep the stones from getting chipped.
You'll need to move to amend section 7-29, care of the cemeteries, because that wasn't part of this amendment, but there is no provision that goes into the detail that you're asking about.
Can we do that now, or do we come back later and amend that?
Why don't you come back at a later point in time?
Okay, that'll be fine. Yeah, we need to do that.
I agree with you. I know that's an issue because my own father's stone in a different cemetery literally looks like it has twisted and it's almost sideways now. And it's just a matter, and especially here, being on sand and the settling, and absolutely. Let's go ahead and bring this back. Do you want to bring it back during the discussion of item K? Is that a good time to bring it back? Or do you mean at a future meeting?
I would recommend it at a future meeting, but you could always provide direction, maybe during your comment section, Mr. Marlowe, to...
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Let's see, next up, Councilman Foreman. Okay, any further discussion from council? If not, let's go ahead and call for the vote. And once again, a unanimous yes. All right, so let's move on to the consent agenda. Once again, we have pulled item K. Do I hear a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
Second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any comment? Seeing none, let's go ahead and call for the vote. And it is unanimous as well. All right, so now on to item K, which is Resolution 17-51, amending the fee schedule for the purchase of burial plots at the Destin Memorial Cemeteries. Mr. Burns, do you want to lead us off on that?
It's not required to read the resolution.
Okay, Mr. Dixon, you called for that item to be pulled. Do you want to lead us off?
Yes, I've seen so many numbers on the grave sites, and I do understand the fact that it's going to take a little longer to weed eat around headstones, and I can't even remember what section it is that we said we'd allow raised headstones, and was it a certain section or a number or a letter, or what was it? Section what?
Section 6.
Section
up in the
6.
cemetery.
I'd like to just throw this out there. I looked at all the numbers and trying to figure everything out, and we're never going to break even on this no matter what we do, but I could go along with $1,000 for any area that has the flat stone, and we're talking about in a newer part of the cemetery. $1,200 in the area that's going to have raised headstones, and $2,000 for non-residents. So we can start the discussion there.
I would second that motion. Any further discussion from anyone? Mr. Foreman?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I don't know whether this is the right place. I agree with this, and I'm going to support it. But a suggestion was made earlier about the possibility of a cemetery committee to be able to monitor and to provide recommendations to the council over a period of time on the changes that we're talking about here. And it's not a bad idea. I have a vested interest in that cemetery, and I know that the things that we've discussed here relative to maintenance of the cemetery are important. Would it be advisable to maybe look into contracting out the maintenance of the cemetery? I'm not asking for an answer at this point in time. I'm tossing it out for future thought, because obviously it's not in this budget. So it's not going to happen. But at some point in time, perhaps what we're talking about is doing the same thing here that we do on the right-of-ways in the other areas of the city and the parks. And we're tailored around being lean and mean in the city of Destin, where we don't have extras almost anywhere. So this may be one of those cases where we can do that. That's all I have to say.
Okay, next up, Councilman Destin.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to make a motion that staff bring back this resolution reflecting Mr. Dixon's proposed fee schedule.
I believe we already had a motion and a second on that, did we not? That was to adopt, based on Councilman's changes.
You have a motion to adopt Mr. Dixon's recommendation, yes.
And the motion was to, for the areas that would have a flat stone, that would be in the newer part of the cemetery, $1,000. In the area 6 that we've talked about for raised headstone would be $1,200. For non-resident would be $2,000.
Okay, and Mr. Destin, what was the? That's all. Okay, just clarifying. Anything further? Okay, Councilman Braden, you're next up.
Thank you. Back to my original question. So each section has 76 burial plots. So if we have this one section has got 76 burial plots. Am I reading that right?
I'm so sorry, sir. Could you please
That's okay.
repeat
The section we're talking about, it says each section has 76 burial plots.
76.
So that's what we're dealing with, the 76 burial plots.
Yes, sir.
Well, if they all sold, that's $76,000 in addition.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
So we have 76 burial plots. Right now,
Yes.
they're $1,000 a piece. We increase it by $1,000, go to $2,000 for residents. That gives us an additional $76,000. And is that right?
If the math is right.
So if we take we take our $1,500 average annual employee wages with an annual cost of $500 for equipment, that gives us 38 years, money for 38 years to take care of that 76 plots. So basically that was my original question, was how did we come up with the $2,000? You know, how do we just go from 1,000 to 2,000? I know there's an additional cost, but it doesn't say here anything about what that's based off of.
It does in the backup for this agenda item. They estimated the additional maintenance times and how many times annually it's done. They looked at the hourly wage for staff, increased costs for personnel, approximately between $965 and $1,930 annually. They estimated that the equipment cost would average $500 annually. That's how they came up with those additional amounts. It's under discussion, the last paragraph on the first page of discussion where they broke it down.
Yes, ma'am. I read all that, and that's how I come to the $1,500 to $2,000 annually increased cost divided by $76,000 gave you 38 years of maintenance. That's why I just was wondering, where did the extra $1,000, how did we come with $1,000? Go from 1,000 to 2,000? Why would we not go from 1,000 to 1,500 or 1,800? Do we just pull $2,000 out of the air and go with that figure? I mean, I don't know if I'm asking that right.
Well, I understand that we've been asked to come back with a resolution to change it to 1,200 for residents and 2,000 for non-residents, and we will be doing that as soon as we can. That wasn't it.
Yes, let me do it again here, because I want to make sure we understand this. If you want to utilize the area, the part of the cemetery where you use a flat headstone, it's $1,000. If you want to utilize the area, which is Area 6 within the cemetery, it would be $1,200. If you are a non-resident, it's $2,000. No, you said it was going to be $1,000. So. Or 1,200, but we do have a lower rate of 1,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Got it, thank you.
Councilman Braden, anything further?
No.
Call the question.
Okay.
Can we have the motion read?
Yes, before you vote, if we can go ahead and have it read again. Do you have it, Mr. Dixon?
Yes,
The
I do.
request of council?
Making a motion to sell our cemetery plots at a rate of, for the area, the newer part of the cemetery, which is the only place that there is any left, I think, $1,000 for the area where you have a flat stone. $1,200 for Area 6, where you can have a raised stone. And $2,000 for any non-resident.
Okay, is that clear for council? All right, let's move for the vote. Okay, we have, if I can count, we have six in favor and 1 opposed. It passes. So moving forward then, we've got comments and presentations. Councilman Braden, you are first up this evening.
Thank you. My first question is where are we with the no parking signs in Crystal Beach? Do we have that where they can be enforced? And
we do get the requests from citizens, and they are vetted through the process that was created, and the Public Services Department goes out and puts them out. In the interim, while we were waiting to fully staff our Code Enforcement Division, the Sheriff's Office had graciously assisted us with the parking issues. I met with our code manager this morning, and he is currently working on the parking plan for code enforcement, the scheduling and the enforcement plans. All 3 of our new code personnel, our manager and our 2 code officers, will be going to a training in November, which will have them fully certified to issue the parking citations. So that's where we are.
I know we discussed at a meeting a while back adding towing to those signs. Was that ever done? Or I noticed there were some applications coming back to add that to the signs.
It was discussed, sir, but there was no vote or direction for us to do towing. It was discussed, but there was no action or direction given to staff to implement towing.
So as it stands right now, we have no way to enforce those no parking signs that we've put out there.
At this moment today, yes, we do. The Sheriff's Office assists us with that. And as I stated, right now, Mr. Mahone is putting together the plan for the staffing, the scheduling, which will include weekends. And in November, all 3 of our new code officers will be trained and certified to issue citations. So we won't need to have the sheriff's assistance. Part of what the parking plan is going to look at is options, towing versus boots, and that will be brought back to council. The new parking plan for enforcement will be brought back to council for some policy decision on options, because The difference between towing and putting boots on vehicles is a policy decision.
Do we know if the sheriff's department has issued any no parking tickets out there?
The 2 or 3 complaints that I've had about parking on Shira especially, when the deputy's gone out there, the cars or the vehicle's been moved before the deputy gets there. So the 3 complaints that and I've had 3 since we've been discussing this. There's been some complaints that came in for Labor Day weekend for people parked across the sidewalks and stuff like that. Some of the renters that came into town did that. Those were different from the complaints that I'm talking about.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
My next question is, our Heritage Park, I'm 99% sure this council was told almost a year ago that the funds were available to start developing that park. That's why we voted to put a fence around it and commence construction. The last meeting I asked about it and the funds are not available. Where are we standing on that?
The funds for construction for the Royal Melvin Heritage Park are dependent upon the ORAC funding, otherwise known as the Restore Grant. As it stands right now, we have done everything as staff that we were asked to do. We have submitted, I think for the 3rd time, our proposal for the grant to the county. From my understanding, the next step in the process is for the county commission to vote upon all of the submitted grant applications, and the ones that are approved will be submitted into grants.gov by county staff. It will go to the Treasury Department, and then they will give the final okay for who will receive the funds. Those funds will then be sent to the county. We will be given the start, the clear to go ahead and start construction, and then we will get the money from the county on a reimbursement basis.
Do we have any idea how long that will take?
No, sir, we do not.
May I speak and add to?
Please.
My recollection was actually similar to Councilman Brady, in that I thought that was one of the reasons we were rushing to vote to get the fence, was so that we didn't lose it, that there had been some documentation sent that said we needed to go ahead and move forward or we would lose the NERDA grant.
It's not a NERDA grant, it's the ORAC funds.
So what about the NERDA grant? And maybe, I know there was some amount of funding that was the reason that we voted that evening, because there was a sense of urgency. Is that what, I mean, am I remembering incorrectly?
The original grant that we received from the state to purchase the property, I believe that's the funds that you're talking about. And those funds were in jeopardy in the sense that if we did not use the property as outlined in our grant application to the state, they could in turn come back to us and say, we need a return of those funds because you haven't followed the plan as outlined in your grant application.
Okay, the purchase of the property was back in what, 2008? That was way before I was here. This was a discussion regarding funds specifically to start the build.
I think the only funds that we've discussed to start the build has been the Restore Act funding.
Do y'all, I mean, as finance manager, do you recall that conversation or at that council meeting?
The only funds that we've discussed to build the park has been the Restore Act funding. We've never had any other funds. The 2 funding sources outside of city funds for that park have been the original grant that we got from the state and then the Restore Act funds.
Okay, well, I don't want to belabor the point, but my recollection is that that was the sense of urgency last year, was some sort of paperwork had been sent and said that they weren't going to award us do the final award for that funds because this was tied up in limbo and we needed to have a decision. And obviously, I'm not the only one with that recollection. Oh, please.
As I recall, the situation is that at the point in time that we were trying to, let's say, discuss with the state the terms of the grant, and that portion of it, it was being appealed as part of the legal actions that were taking place to use the property for other than pedestrian use. And so at that point in time, we had to show the state that we were proceeding on the design that we had given them for the grant. And so that was the urgency, is that if we continued to let the property be used for other than the design, then the grant would be null and void.
If I'm
Okay, Mr. Braden, this was originally your, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
We're waiting on the commission to rubber stamp it and send it to the Treasury,
That is correct.
and they haven't voted for approval of any of the projects yet?
That's correct. We
But
were
it's-
given no time frame as to when they would come back before County Commission.
Okay. So we don't know if it's in their pipeline or their docket or whatever?
No, sir, but I am going to be meeting with Mr. John Hofstad and the other
Yes,
city managers tomorrow morning, and I plan on asking that question.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Braden, back to you.
Thank you. I do remember some of what Mr. Foreman was saying, that it was being used for something other than the pedestrian, but we were also told that the funds were available or would be available within 30 days to start construction on that property. If you could please let us know whatever you find out when you do meet with them, what they're and what they plan on doing, or where we are on the big scope of things. I would appreciate it.
Yes, sir, I will. I think part of the delay was this 2017 legislative session, because it was the new legislation that added the extra layer of oversight to the process, which is why it needed to now come back before the county. But we're working the process, and I will try to get an answer for us tomorrow morning.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. I'm done. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and skip myself at this time. Councilman Dixon?
Nothing tonight, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilman Foreman?
Anastasia Miller to our city committee, our Destin Youth Council, and at this time I would like to make that nomination.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion from council? Seeing none, let's go ahead and make the vote.
I'm the one missing.
And it is unanimous. She is confirmed. Go ahead, Mr. Foreman. All right, Councilman Marler.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. It's my pleasure to nominate Ms. Shirley Perman to the Public Works Public Safety Committee to replace the late Mrs. Wiedenheimer.
Second.
Okay, council, any discussion? Seeing none, let's go for the vote. And another unanimous. Anything further, Mr. Marler?
Not at this time.
Okay, nothing from me. Councilman Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing this evening.
Councilman Morgan?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay, moving along then. We've got Mayor Fisher, who is not here this evening, and Land Use Attorney.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay, and City Attorney?
I'd just like to thank Lisa Firth. I don't know if it's irony, but we did bury a relative of mine today at the Destin Cemetery, and she did a great job afterwards doing a reception for us at the community center. So great job, Lisa.
Okay, that concludes the main agenda. Now I'll entertain any comments from the audience. If anybody would like to speak, any matters Okay, sir, go ahead and step forward and name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Hennessy. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Lewis, Longman and Walker. I'm here representing the Destin Business League, a nonprofit association of owners, rental interests, management companies, and basically supporters of vacation rentals. My law firm represents vacation rental interests before local governments around the state and before the state legislature. Our preference is to get involved with communities, governments, and rental interests early in a process so that vacation rental interests can work with government to identify real concerns, actual issues that exist, and help formulate actual solutions to these issues. The people we represent, they're not subject to a simple single description. I mean, they vary from individuals who own homes that they rent for a number of years until they retire, professional vacation management companies, and developers, as well as just any individual from any walk of life. Our members have one thing in common, though, with everyone in this community, and that is that they live, work, or they own property, own a residence in the community. And in addition to that, what they seek is to be treated fairly by government, to be treated like any other property owners, to have their property rights respected. Frankly, property rights shouldn't depend on whether a property owner is a full-time resident or a part-time resident, or whether they rent their property for a limited period of time or a long period of time. All property owners should be treated equally, equally by local government, based on how they manage their property, whether or not they're a good neighbor. Your government has been discussing the issues of vacation rentals, but really what those issues are related to tourism. You're a community, like many communities in Florida, that were once small coastal towns that, frankly, people have been coming to visit for decades. And eventually, the people that come here, they buy here, they stay here, and they become part of the community, just like those who were born here and have lived here all their lives. But to regulate their properties, the use of their homes, the regulation should be based on that use. It shouldn't be based on the use, it should be based on actual issues or problems that you may have with that use. Because the reality is, vacation rental or not, it's all a residential use. Look, what my interest here that I'm representing is asking is an opportunity to avoid making this a situation that's a problem. Avoid having a community picking sides, and instead work together for a cooperative, long-lasting solution that will benefit the community as a whole. And so that's why I'm here requesting that this community consider being proactive and setting up a task force, setting up an outreach into the community for all affected members of the community, all stakeholders, to come together and identify what issues do exist with the tourism growth that the beautiful city of Destin here is experiencing, and develop solutions that will have buy-in from the community as a whole towards a lasting legislation Our clients specifically request that this task force be headed up by one of you, by a city commissioner, so that you will be educated on what all stakeholders involved bring to the table, what their concerns are, and how to resolve this. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I know we have several members of our community here that wish to speak to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hennessy, I did have a question.
Yes.
I noticed that you underscored the fact that you felt that all property owners should be treated equally.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that mean that you feel that they should have the same occupancy standards as well?
Anytime that there is a solution by government, it needs to be one that applies across the board. So standards, for example, housing standards exist across the board in your fire codes already. And certainly those types of standards do apply across the board. And the people I represent have no objection to meeting statewide fire code regulations, Fair Housing Act requirements, and similar standards, provided that any residential use is subject to those same limitations.
Great, thank you. Anything from council?
I have a question.
Mr. Braden?
You know, you're here representing the individuals with short-term rentals, trying to protect their rights. Us, the city council, we are responsible for protecting everyone's rights. And when you have a rental home, short-term rental, that has the occupancy that are parking all in the street and in the right-of-way and on the neighbor's lawn, and then their trash is piled up, and we have photos of all that, that's blowing down the street in the neighbor's yard. If it wasn't for that, you wouldn't need to be here. You wouldn't, I mean, there would be no reason for you to even be here if your clients were not occupying a place or renting a place of that nature, that, you know, if there's 4 cars in the, you know, if they're all parked in their driveway or in the garage, the place is clean, there is no problem. Everybody's rights are just as important, and that's the rights that we're responsible for protecting, as everyone's, even the neighbors.
Councilman, I appreciate that question, because that's exactly the kind of example that I've heard all around the state and all of the communities in Florida that are dealing with these issues. And the reality that we've always found is that your vacation rental homeowners are actually the most proactive about dealing with issues of noise, parking, trash. Sir, I hear your skepticism. I hear your skepticism, but I'm telling you that if you deal with the factual evidence that exists as opposed to the anecdotal evidence, the stories you hear, you find that this is a good reason why a task force is a good solution for those of you who represent all the interests, to be able to sit down and share that information with the vacation rental community, because they're part of your community. They wouldn't have invested in the properties they have if they weren't picking to be belonging to a beautiful community like Destin. Okay, and they want to keep it that way, and it's important for their homes as well. And so if there is evidence, such as you're saying, pictures such as you're saying, problems, the people I represent are the first people that want to address those and be proactive and be part of the solution.
Right, certainly. I think we can agree that they're definitely responsible renters. I mean, for sure, but there are also some very irresponsible renters as well.
Just like there's responsible and irresponsible homeowners.
Absolutely. You're correct. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm. Next up. Yes, sir? If you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Rick Scally. I live at 3375 Scenic Highway 98 in Destin, and I'm a property manager. I'm a rental manager owner. I lived in Destin since 2002. I retired after 30 years as a credit union CEO. I was on vacation with my pets, and it came down to Destin, and I couldn't find a decent place where they would accept pets. And so I started Easy Street Pet-Friendly Vacation Rentals, right? When I retired from the credit industry, I took my entire retirement, my wife's retirement, and we purchased 4 homes in Crystal Beach. Actually, 3 of them next to one another and one in the next neighborhood. We've taken property management very seriously because it's literally our retirement. I now manage my 4 rental homes and 9 homes for other people, friends that have asked me to manage their properties. We're small on purpose because this is like my retirement job. We had signs in front of our house with our contact information from the day we started business. We didn't need a regulation to tell us to do that. I've also contacted all of my neighbors in all of my houses, whether they're mine or ones I manage, and I gave them my business card and I instructed them, if you have any issues with any of my properties, please let me know immediately and I'll deal with it. We have, in all of our rental contracts, we get the name and age of every guest that stays in our homes. We have a maximum number of people that are allowed to stay in our home based on a number of beds. We don't pack the houses. We have a specific maximum number based on 2 people on kings, 2 people on a queen, a single on a bunk bed, and then 2 on a sleeper sofa. We also have a maximum number of cars that can be allowed to stay at any one of our properties. And we manage that. We make certain that they clearly understand in the information that we send to them prior to coming to stay with us how many cars that we have. Problem we run into, though, is a lot of people look at rentals as Destin as a location for them to meet. Some come from Texas, some come from Louisiana, some come from New Jersey, and they all meet here. And it's very difficult for them to carpool and limit the number of cars, even though we require that. And when they show up in my property with more cars than are allowed in our driveways, they ask me, where am I going to put my cars? And I said, well, you know, we told you that. And what I normally recommend they do, go to Walmart, park it in Walmart. I don't allow anybody to park on the grass. I don't allow anybody to park on the right of way. And we very closely monitor both the attendance as well as the parking. Spring break, another problem. We've been hosting spring break kids literally from the day we started this business. But we created a whole separate set of rules specifically for spring breakers. In fact, we actually send them to them prior to accepting the reservation, and I personally interview them over the telephone to determine if they understand what's expected of them when they come here. I'll try to be quick. And when they do get here, I personally actually interview each one of them. When they get here and I let them know in person what's expected of them. And then I typically go in with 1 or 2 other rental managers and we hire an off-duty sheriff. And they patrol every night. I patrol every day. And we monitor the kids. We absolutely don't allow any non-registered guests in the houses. What I'm trying to say is that I consider myself a very responsible property manager. Most of the other property managers that I associate with are responsible property managers. But what you said about irresponsible managers is true. They're out there, and typically what those people are people that live in Atlanta, buy a house down here in Destin, rent over VRBO, and never step foot in Destin. Because I know when I patrol and I look around, I can tell you exactly the houses that are causing the problems in the area. As far as trash, typically during the summer we have a 7-day turnover, Saturday to Saturday. When is trash pickup? Tuesday, Friday. When do guests check out? Saturday. When do they take out the trash? Saturday. And so I literally have no trash in my trash cans during the week, and then Saturday when everybody checks out, they take all their trash and it spills over on the ground. And then for the last 10 years, I've hired a Saturday service to come and take care of our trash. Again, the point that I'm trying to make is that don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There are some irresponsible people. Find out who those people are. Put together a commission, check with the sheriff and find out the calls that he's received. Find out where the problem areas are. I'd love to help in that area because I think very highly. I love the city of Destin. I serve on the water company board. I was on the Chamber of Commerce board. I was on the Rotary board. I'm very involved in my city and I love it. And this is my livelihood. My entire retirement is wrapped around that. So I'm out of time, but consider that. If you put together a commission, I'd love to serve on something like that. I'd love to fix the problem, identify what those problems are and fix the problem, rather than pass a blanket rule and we be affected. My biggest fear from what I heard is that they may limit the minimum days that you can rent your property. And this is what I heard, and that's one of the reasons I came here, that during the season, it's a 7-day rental, and then my off-season, I rent a minimum of 3 days, because the families aren't out of school, and consequently, they can only come for a 3-day period. If the council changes the rule where the minimum 12 months a year is 7 days, I'm in deep trouble, because I can't pay my mortgage starting September 1 through beginning of March.
Thank you so much. And that's something that I don't think we've actually discussed, so that may just be something that's out there.
Yeah.
Thank you
very much. I appreciate it.
Sure. Yes, sir. Mr. Scully, I believe Mr. Destin has a question or comment.
Well, and I'm going to direct it to you, but I think everybody, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces out there. I don't believe that any of us have the intention of, I don't want to get, I'm very sensitive to the commercial interests. You guys are sitting here on a Monday night. You guys aren't the problem. I mean, you really aren't. You are all, I'm looking at tremendously responsible individuals. You have much better things to do with your Monday night. You care about this community. You live here. I know that we have some concerns. I know that there was some laughter from the dais earlier, but we do have problems. I know that we only have the estimate is that we probably only have about 20% of all the short-term rentals actually registering with the city of Destin. But I guarantee you, I could probably poll everybody in here, you have all registered. We're not talking about you guys as a problem. So I am very much interested in seeing if we can put together a community task force. I'm very interested, and we're at the beginning phase of this. There's nothing sitting in front of us right now to vote on. We haven't reviewed anything, but I don't want to go in and heavy-handedly pass something that will prevent you from being able to pay your mortgage. But there are concerns that we have to take into account, because from a lawyer to a lawyer, I do disagree. I understand the equity argument that all property owners are equal, but the uses are different. They are. There is a difference between families that come in and stay for 3 or 4 nights, 7 nights. Their use is different. They stay up later. They tend to be louder. They come and go more than a single family residence would. It's because they're on vacation. That's something we have to take into account. But at the end of the day, noise ordinances are a good start. There are nuisance laws in place. There are parking codes that we need to enforce on our end. But I think going heavy-handedly in and changing occupancy rates or minimum days, I want to make sure it's finally tailored to make sure that nothing affects you guys in a negative way, because you guys are not genuinely, you're not the problem. You guys, I can assure you, you're not the issue.
Parker, that's music to my ears.
But we need your input, and we need to have some sort of mechanism that's in place that allows the communication back and forth. And I do agree with I believe it was Mr. Hennessy's point of a task force. We do need some buy-in from the stakeholders, and we got to figure out exactly how to tailor this, just to calm and everyone's fears, because I know everybody was geared up, and I didn't expect everybody to show up tonight. I had a couple meetings with some of you folks over the next few weeks just to discuss this stuff, but I want to make sure everybody understands we're going to look at this very carefully, and that we're not going to go and harm anybody with overreach. Anyways, that was a long-winded.
And I applaud you for being such a responsible property manager, and I know we have a lot of responsible property managers here represented in this room. And there are some bad apples, and we've got the photos from concerned residents in Crystal Beach to prove it. And you're probably right. They're probably from Atlanta or wherever, and they've never set foot in Destin. But just to kind of calm everyone's fears, there is nothing in front of the council in terms of regulating short-term rentals at the moment. Our city manager, there's nothing in the docket, there's nothing in the pipeline. And I think this was all probably spurred from a resolution we passed last meeting. But we have nothing we're voting on that's going to change the way you do business as of yet. And if we do, a task force would certainly help to bridge this gap between us and
Well, I can tell you,
your
I was
industry.
kind of sleepy.
Sure.
I mean, I wasn't involved in politics. I did that for
Yeah.
30 years. And I was kind of sound asleep, and then a couple of friends of mine says, hey, do you know what they're doing? And it got my attention.
But we're not doing
And
anything.
So
There's-
my
there's
point
nothing
is,
in front of us.
and I applaud that. I think that's wonderful. My point is, if I can be involved, I mean, if I got 15 years' experience, I know where the bad apples are, and I know what the bad apple issues are that we deal with. If I could be involved in that, I'd be happy to do that.
Sure.
Because I've always looked at the city of Destin as a partner.
Absolutely.
I mean, some of my best
Yeah,
friends
and I
have
hope-
served on the city council and involved in the city, and I want to continue that relationship, and I was fearing, am I now in an adversarial relationship with my city council, with my government?
You're not.
I couldn't believe that, because probably you're just wonderful.
And
I couldn't believe it.
we've made changes to some parking regulations
Yeah.
that I still stand by and think are very common sense.
I agree.
And we
Can I make a
discussed
suggestion?
a noise ordinance that the sheriff can actually enforce, because the one we have now, he can't. But anyways, yeah.
Can I make a suggestion? Two things. One of all, trash on Saturdays is a problem, period. And it costs me literally thousands of dollars because I hire an outside firm to come in every Saturday. You know, I talked to the city a couple times when Mr. Casella was the city manager about somehow making an arrangement for a Saturday pickup. I pay for trash pickup. I mean, we're in the Crystal Beach, maybe not the entire city, but Crystal Beach, that's almost dominated by vacation rentals, and that's where the trash is an issue. The other issue, this is kind of radical, but there's a lot of vacation renters that come from different parts of the state to have their family reunion here in Destin. And getting them down, I think the maximum number of parking I have in any one of my houses is like 4. 3 is the average, a couple are just 2. And there's 4 or 5 different families that come together because Destin is so centralized. Is there any possibility that the city could buy a lot and put in a 1 or 2 story parking garage and charge for it? I guarantee you, my guests would pay.
Talk to the TDC.
All right,
We don't. We just passed the budget. We don't have
get them
the
on the
money.
mediums. It'll get them away from across the sidewalks. It'll eliminate a lot of the park. They have no place to go, and they don't want to park on the mediums. They don't want to do all those things. But when one comes from Texas and one comes from New Jersey and one comes from Louisiana, where do they put their car? You know, Walmart can't take them all. But I'm just saying. I mean, maybe I better shut up.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much again. We appreciate your comments. And for those of you that weren't at the last council meeting, there was a resolution that we passed regarding short-term rentals. And all that was simply a resolution saying that the council was in favor of municipalities setting the rules for their own cities, rather than Tallahassee setting a blanket ordinance that would apply equally to every city, every location throughout the state. The goal there is that obviously issues we might have here in Destin are different from issues in Defuniak Springs. They're different than what's experienced in New Smyrna Beach, Ocala. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, and we are very much in favor of home rule and allowing the cities to decide what the best decisions are for their respective cities. And that's all that resolution was about. I know there was some commentary thinking that we were saying we didn't want short-term rentals anymore, and absolutely not. That had nothing to do with anything whatsoever. That was not said, and that was not part of that resolution. Okay, sir, I believe you were next up. Mr. Dixon? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. I said that a little bit ago when the gentleman was up here speaking about the fact that parking may not be as big an issue, but we get emails every day, it seems like, with pictures of what I consider to be serious parking violations. But some of this stuff we brought on ourselves. When we allow people to build 8 and 10 bedroom homes and require 4 parking spaces, basically we did that to ourselves. I think we've since fixed some of that, but part of that's on us. And so, when I laughed a little bit ago, saying when the gentleman was talking about the parking stuff, I promise you that is our biggest issue, parking and the noise. But the biggest issue is the parking. We can deal with the noise, but the parking issue, in my opinion, is the one that we're going to have a hard time getting our hands around, in the fact that we do have people that live in Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana that are building the homes which are fine. I don't have any problem with the short-term rental stuff, but, you know, come on, you got to provide enough for yourself, for the people that are there. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. My name is Jason Sprinkle. I'm a 15-year resident of Destin and quit practicing law to come down and run vacation rentals of all things. And so I see a lot of both sides of the comments that have happened tonight, and I appreciate Councilman Destin's comments. I think they'll cut mine in half, hopefully. Got a wife who's been a pediatrician here for 15 years as well, so Destin is an important part of our life, obviously, and we've owned vacation rentals here, we've rented vacation rentals here, we've basically done every component of it that you can imagine. We currently run and own a company called 360 Blue, which manages 310 homes, about 40 of them are in Destin. It's a pretty big operation, just at 85 employees, all of obviously who are deeply invested in this issue. And really the reason why we're here tonight and the reason why we sent out emails and called everybody we could get our hands on was related to the proposed changes to the LDC that dealt with occupancy that we got a copy of, and I don't know where they are in terms of passing or being brought up, but they made it to my desk and they caused great concern for me based on kind of the rippling impact that I saw economically. And I think, you know, as a result of that, just to give you some quick dialogue in terms of where we've come so far, I called everybody I knew that owned a vacation rental company, which added up to about 45 folks, professionally managed companies, and asked them to come sit in the room the other night. Told them what I had been handed or what was sent to me, and basically brought it up for discussions and said, listen, there's obviously problems that Destin is facing. The city council is trying to address them. From everybody I know in the room, just like you guys pointed out, it's a good group of solid, competent, well-organized, nice folks who want to do right by the community and by themselves. They all live here. They make their living doing this. It's a long-term vision for us, just like it is for you guys. And I think there's some obvious low-hanging fruit. I called the city manager the other day who was extraordinarily kind. First, she talked me through the whole history of kind of the litigation that has happened in other cities and the thought processes that were happening here in the context of the resolution you guys passed. And I said, look, I've got a group of very willing people who want to solve problems. Why don't we get a group together? And she said, I think that's a great idea. I would love to participate. I thought council suggesting that we have buy-in from you guys and have one of you as a member on that would be very helpful. But the noise is tricky. I think we're all eager to get behind it. Parking is something that's tricky, but I think it's solvable. Trash, our basic position is we're begging for help on it. We spend a fortune trying to pick up trash privately. I think that's an easy area for us to cooperate, and you got an awful lot of money at issue here that's willing to help in any way we can. So I think if we can identify specific issues that y'all are seeing, because I know your inboxes are filling up, I think we can solve them. And the challenge is, as you said, Councilman Destin, is I think we don't represent all the properties. I think there's a lot of VRBO homes that aren't as cautious. They don't have their reputation on. And I can tell you from the things that are in place right now for trash and noise, you know, we get the calls. My inbox fills up as well. But the professional folks in town, we're out there in a half hour or an hour trying to solve it, and I think solving it. So I haven't had a trash problem or a noise problem or an occupancy problem that came before me that we didn't get solved quickly if it came to kicking them out. But the occupancy is a different level of impact for us. And it goes back to your point. We manage an awful lot of houses that have 8, 9, 10, 11 bedrooms. So we've got our fair share of the ones that probably come up on the list if you're looking at statistics. But I don't think you'll see those big ones coming up on the list of emails for trash problems or parking problems, because I think we professionally manage them. So I think if we can collectively figure out who the homes are which are not professionally managed and then hold them to the same standards that we're already holding ourselves to, I think we can eliminate these problems. Real quick, the occupancy impact. Got the numbers from HomeAway today. 40% of the rental homes in Destin would be impacted by the proposed current regulation. And the way property values work, as I'm sure you guys know, is if you lower occupancy, you lower rental rates. And if you lower rental rates, you lower rental income for the year. And rental income for the year in Destin and Crystal Beach sets the price of the house. So if you take 40% of rental income houses in town and you lower their annual rental income, which this would definitely do, you're going to lower the property values and therefore the ad valorem taxes for those. And that's a big, big impact to all of us. So just something worth considering. I would welcome an opportunity to lead or sit on a task force as well. Thank you for your time.
Sure. I have actually two comments. And well, actually, first, is HomeAway? I'm not familiar with that.
It's VRBO. It's the
Oh,
parent company, which is
okay.
now Expedia.
Okay. And I don't mean this to be hostile at all, but I know you said lower the numbers of folks that can stay there and the lower the rate. And
Yes,
I think
ma'am.
what we're seeing in a lot of cases, and I'm not saying it's you guys, and I know for a fact it's not a lot of you guys, higher the occupancy, the higher the rate. And so I'm sure y'all have come across these. We've got 4 and 5 bedroom homes that are advertised as sleeping 32 and 40. And so, you know, that's sort of where, as you might imagine, some of these problems are coming in.
Sure, and to answer your question specifically, 40 people in a 4-bedroom is not tenable. None of us,
Right.
we don't have any properties like that. But we do have big 7-bedrooms that are designed with 2 kitchens and 4 washers and dryers and huge pools, and they go way over the limits of what you guys are proposing. And they're 3 families that come down, or their grandparents that come down with a bunch of kids, and we pick up the trash, and they're not noisy. You know, we have all the same restrictions that the other professional managers have. So I think we can get to the solutions without the negative economic impact from an occupancy limitation. And one last comment on the resolution. As I read the resolution, and part of the reason it came up for us is, as I understand the law, which may not be at all, so take it with a grain of salt, but as I understand it, that you guys locally have the power to put all the standard regulations in for trash and gas and noise and all that stuff. What you lack currently, and what's left for the vestige of the state, is the ability to prevent vacation rentals, which is not on the board for anybody, as you mentioned. But the other 2 things that the resolution called for was a limitation on the duration or the frequency of rentals. And we talked a little bit with the city manager, but I think there's some misunderstanding on how rentals actually work, 3 days versus 7 days, and I think a quick workshop could clear a lot of that up fast.
That'd be great. And I know there have been a couple not ordinances, but state laws passed that deal with short-term rentals.
Right.
And one of them restricted, I believe, everything. And then that was in 11, I believe. Don't quote me because
Yep,
I'm not
2011,
100%
that's right.
certain. And then I believe they tried to release it somewhat in 2014.
Yes, ma'am.
But what has happened in subsequent legislatures is that they're trying to revert back to the
That's right.
2011, where the state would literally be in
both
charge of
sides
making
want all or nothing.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yep.
So that's what this was, a statement from us saying we don't want it to go back to the way it was in 2011. We want to maintain the ability to make the decisions for our cities.
Yeah, and I think together we can fix it.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, sir.
I have a
Oh,
question
Mr.
for you,
Brady.
sir. I think you're right. I mean, our trash and parking is is 2 of the biggest problems, and I think we can fix that. One thing you might want to kick around is the 3rd biggest problem, and that is we do have homes that are 2,200 square feet with 6 bedrooms in it, advertising to sleep 27 people. I think that's the biggest problem we have. You can't have that. Not like the homes you're talking about, of course. And I mean, by all means, you know, love to have the 3 or 4 families come down, because I do it myself with my family.
Sure.
We rent a place and we all go meet somewhere, and it's great. No way would I want to stop that. But we do have people that are, you know, taking older home. It's,
That's
you know,
right.
2,000, 2,500 square feet and make 6 bedrooms in it and sleep 27 people.
Yeah. I think they're the exception, but I think that their problems will rise to the surface if we look at the exact problems you're dealing with. Like, you can't sleep 40 people in a 4-bedroom and not have trash problems, parking problems, and noise problems. So if you've got those regulations in place without an occupancy limitation that catches, you know, the other 95% of the homes that have high occupancy but are built for it and operate within the rules, then you're fixing the problem without, you know, creating a negative economic impact unnecessarily.
That's right. Thank you so much. That's all.
Mr. Foreman?
Thank you. I think y'all have been very helpful to us tonight. I think you have exactly the right attitude. And I wanted to comment on Mr. Hennessy's point before, is that we're not adverse to vacation rentals or even tourists. We like tourists.
Yes, sir.
Here, the problem is when you say a vacation rental is the same as a single-family house when it's not. And our problem is buffering them. How do you separate them? Or if you have them mixed together in the same area. See, one of our roles here is zoning.
Yes, sir.
And coming up with the standards for the individual area so that a person that goes there knows that the house next to them is going to be similar to the one that they live in and what have you. But when you start mixing them, that's when it becomes hard to control. A single-family dwelling might have a permit for 2.5 car spaces. That doesn't fit a VRBO.
Yes, sir.
And so they're not equal. They're dealt with somewhat separately, and that doesn't mean that we're going to have laws that are abusive of the VRBOs, but we should be able to come up with some accommodation for them.
Yeah, I think the desire to treat property or equally, whether it's a private resident or VRBO, it doesn't mean that we don't think they're completely different. I think it's a legal argument to say property owners deserve equal rights, but they're certainly different animals, and I think we can manage them differently. But Crystal Beach, which was the one that you mentioned, it's, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it feels about like 2/3 rentals. And so if you live in Crystal Beach and you have a house in the middle of those, and we got some folks here that are private homeowners inside of Crystal Beach, you're living in a principally rental community. Somewhere on your street there's a vacation rental that's got 20 people in it, and it may or may not be next door to you, but it's part of living in that community. If you live in Kelly or downtown Destin or Regatta, you don't have a lot of vacation rentals next to you. So zoning does take care of some of it. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, come on up.
Good evening, Ken Wampler, 310 Lorite Loop. I just wanted to bring up a couple of points that haven't already been rehashed. We talked about this probably 8 months ago, and currently on the books you have ordinances that will deal with the major issues, and I encourage you and implore you to deal with that. And I would ask you to take and direct staff to look at what's supposed to go in front of the LPA next week and remove the occupancy limits from that so that the group can get together, work with City Council relative to constructive, productive wording to go in the land development code. So the time is right to direct staff to remove that wording so that we don't have to rehash this thing on the 27th of September or whenever it's going to go, because it doesn't come back to you all until October, and it'd be a shame to lose a month worth of time with them working on verbiage that limits occupancy. That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem and council members. My name is Nick Athens. I am not a local resident. I reside in Marietta, Georgia, and I don't make my living here. But I wanted to go ahead and give you my perspective that I hope is constructive. I first purchased here 20 years ago as a second home. My kids grew up here, shared the same beaches that you all shared. But my first trips here to Destin were perhaps maybe where some would like to turn back the clocks when US 98 was a 2-lane road that hugged the coastline. There was no Destin Commons, no Mid-Bay Bridge. But the reality is this is some of the most beautiful sand in the world. We develop a personal relationship with all of the people who rent from us. And I remember very distinctly one who resided in Aruba. I've never been to Aruba. I don't survey beaches around the globe, but they said this was the most beautiful place they've been. And it's something that we can't stop because it is a beautiful place. So I'd like to look at the constructive ways to go ahead and limit so that everyone who comes here, residents, second homeowners, and tourists can enjoy. Our typical renter is someone that's 3, sometimes 4 generations. That's 75 to 80%. The balance are people that share vacations together. And it's not unusual that people my age, and I'm older than many of y'all, that they have mom or dad's credit card. It's a matriarch, patriarch that is paying for a trip because they want to go ahead and have it. And I have had many instances where the matriarch or patriarch passed before they even were having that vacation together. So this is a beautiful place. We'd like to preserve that. I have a vested interest in that. All of us from Atlanta don't come in and leave. I'd like to think that some of us contribute. I have a great deal of board and board governance experience in the for-profit and nonprofit arenas. So I sit on a local board, homeowners board, to give them that kind of broad experience. And then two, as an economic reality at the end of the year, between federal income tax, state income tax, Obamacare tax, I'm paying 49+% on anything I make. I'd much rather invest that in the local community behind local contractors and providers and help contribute to the community that way. So I would like to go ahead and just make these points. I appreciate this time. And so that maybe there isn't that stereotypical Atlanta person that comes down because we love this area and want to preserve it also. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Any further comment? Yes, sir.
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem and councilors, I'm Guy Tadlock. I live at 502 Noriego. And while you're looking for parking places for some of our short-term rentals, could you also look for some parking places for boat trailers and boats? Because there's not places to put them either. No, seriously, this has been rather interesting. And I'd be the first to say that I don't think anybody is against short-term rentals. I think there's some very responsible short-term rentals companies and some very responsible owners. This gentleman that went to the trouble to hire a police deputy, or they went together, a group of them went together. That's great. I really applaud that. But I kind of wonder if he was really doing his due diligence on who he was renting to, why he needed to do that. But be that as it may, one of the biggest problems is overcrowding, is packing. We've talked about that many times. That leads to noise, that leads to garbage, and it's a hard thing to maintain. But I would like to mention one thing, that some of the people that spoke tonight, it almost seems like it's kind of a little late coming to the game. Maybe we should have been a little bit more proactive prior to getting into this situation. I think some of these properties are in my neighborhood, and they haven't been, and I'm pretty close with the association, and I've not seen these folks talking and trying to work with us. I want to leave you a thought, and there are some very responsible rental management companies. But I think one of the largest in the area, if not the largest in the area, they don't check people in. They do remote check-ins. They have no idea how many cars are there. They don't have any idea how many people are there. I think sometimes they're astounded when they go clean up on Saturdays and pick up the garbage, because a lot of times we'll call them, say, you can't leave that garbage on Saturday out by the road. And they have to go hire Junkaway. And I've seen Junkaway come in there with a trailer behind a pickup truck, one house, and literally fill up the truck and the trailer. And that's an example when you have overpacking and more people are staying in a house than what they should. But no one is against short-term rentals. We've got to work together on it. And I think that it's one thing to for a city that has very limited code enforcement, and I know that the city is working on that. But a lot of the things we're talking about tonight, like some of the rental companies registering, I think in my subdivision, I think probably less than half are registered. Maybe not half, maybe a third of the ones are not registered. And that's a very important thing. It's a pretty profitable thing not to register your house, because if you don't register your house, you're not paying, you're probably not paying bed taxes. And if you don't register your house, you're probably not paying income taxes. But all of that puts an impact on the folks that live here full time. And, you know, I'm very sympathetic with the gentleman that put his 401k plan into his business. I put my 401k plan in coming down here to live and to be a part of this community. And I feel like that myself, as well as a lot of people, that my neighbors, that our quality of life is negatively impacted by these people that are more interested in making money in a single-family residential area than they are being good neighbors. So let's be good neighbors, let's work together, let's be proactive, and let's try to come up with something that'll work for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir, come on up. No worries. Press the button so we can hear you.
My name's Micah Berg. I own Real Joy Vacations. Our office is on Airport Road. I live in Kelly Plantation, which is debatably not part of the city of Destin. Understood.
You're welcome to join us at any time.
However, over the last 10 years, I have lived in and around Destin. We manage over 350 vacation rentals. The majority of those are here in Destin. Maybe not Destin proper, all of them, but quite a few are here. My point is, we have a vested interest as well, and everybody's had good comments. With all due respect to the gentleman who was just up here, a lot of the complaints that I hear are in neighborhoods that weren't designed to be single-family residents. A lot of these neighborhoods were built and only exist for vacation rentals, and now other people have come in and lived, which is fine. I think what we could summarize to say is some of the smartest people in short-term rentals in the entire industry live in Destin, Florida, in the entire industry. I have 50 properties we manage in Nashville and 40 in Denver. There are unsmart people, because I don't have a better word, in those two cities. I think what we have here is an opportunity for the rest of Florida to put together some of the smartest minds, work with our city council, and come up with something that has been deliberately debated beforehand so that we don't have more meetings that take 3, 4, 5 hours. I think we can do this. I apologize on behalf of our group for having the attorney present first, because that can be threatening. But we're not trying to be threatening, we're trying to be correct. And I applaud you for all being interested in our, especially you, Mr. Destin, interested in our success, because Destin would not exist without us. It would be a very different place, and it was a very different place. And I think together we like where it is. Maybe we should debate on where it's going and be very careful where it goes. But I implore you to invest in the committee, make sure everybody that is here is involved directly, because we all really care. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further comment? Okay, seeing none, we are, all righty, sir, come on up. I was this close.
Council, Dana Matthews, I'm a local lawyer. I also work with the Destin Business League, some of the members that have spoken to you all tonight. I was raised here since 1968, other than the time I spent in the Seminole world in Tallahassee. And as you guys know from appearing before you for a number of years, I've been heavily invested personally as well as professionally in the real estate development world, but in particularly in Destin. And in the social fabric of this community. I coached Little League ball for 22 years. I've been involved with the churches and all the nonprofits and the schools, and it's always been a balancing test that we've had to face, especially as we've grown, and people from all over the world. We didn't have the internet when I moved here. We actually had to make phone calls to get people to come visit us. And now, with an email and a blog, everybody knows about Destin from all over the world. I do extensive traveling with my family and also professionally, and everybody knows where Destin's at. So we've got problems in terms of whether it be infrastructure, whether it be short-term rentals, noise, parking, we can go on and on. But the thing that impressed me within the last couple of weeks of meeting with some of these people that have shown up here tonight is you got a lot of intellectual capital here in this, following up the last speaker, and people who are willing to commit their time and energy to help y'all and themselves and our community come up with something better than what has been suggested in the Ordinance 13 in particular. I think that's what kind of galvanized, not necessarily what happened last week, but Ordinance 13 that when you all contracted West Florida Regional Planning Council to come in and give you some suggestions. That's the ordinance that I have here, and then somebody, I presume it's staff, through some direction from council, has come up with another version of that, and it hasn't come back before you, but it's my understanding that it's going to LPA, and a couple of the provisions in there is what's given everybody some big concern, as they've discussed with you tonight, concerning occupancy rates. One wasn't mentioned, was an integrated, hardwired smoke and carbon dioxide system that on your annual renewal for your license, that if you don't have it, you got to come in and you got to rewire your house. I haven't seen any estimates yet. I've been told by general contractors that that's a quite expensive proposition, and if it's not part of somebody's budget, is that something we need to do that the fire code is not already addressing? These are rhetorical questions. The bottom line is, I think that these people are willing, this Destin Business League and its reps are willing to not only sit and chair and be involved in a task force, but we would definitely like somebody from the city council to be involved also in those type of workshops and bring other stakeholders. I mean, other BRB owners who may or may not be exasperating some of the problems that we have, but bring as many stakeholders together to help y'all formulate at the end of the day a policy that you think would be beneficial for all the citizens. So following up on what Mr. Wampler said, I would ask y'all to pull this ordinance because there's the major changes in it are the ones that I think need to be addressed. And if it's going to LPA in the next week or so, then we're going to be back dealing with them and having to come back to y'all. We'd rather set up a task force that would, where we could start that dialogue sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Could I just add one thing before you adjourn the meeting, if you don't mind? Just in response, because the comprehensive plan amendments are going to the LPA on Thursday, but these specific changes that everyone is talking about right now with respect to the maximum occupancy requirements for short-term rentals, those are not part of the comp plan. Those are proposed LDC amendments, and they are not on the agenda for Thursday. So they are not currently scheduled for an LPA meeting.
I would also like to nominate Tuffy for that committee.
And people, please, that are here, please know I have no issues with the vacation rentals. I really don't. The only issues that I have is that how can anybody build a 4-story 10-bedroom home and expect the neighbors to have to put up with their parking, or the neighbors to have to put up with their noise, or the neighbors to have to whatever, and you know, a lot of things have been said up here tonight, but you know, one of the things is that, you know, the Crystal Beach area is designed for vacation rentals. It's not. It's a residential neighborhood. You know, it is on the beach, but on the other side, they were not, in my opinion, were not designed. There's no code or ordinance or anything that says those areas are basically vacation rental areas. And I think what everybody has to realize is that when they come here on vacation, they're going to come possibly live next door to somebody that lives there full time. And, you know, they don't need to have their cars parked in their driveways and they're taking up, you know, 8 spaces or whatever it may be, unless they have those 8 spaces on their property. And the issues we get in emails today that show clear parking where it'd be a nightmare to try to get around. And another thing that I want to emphasize is that I've heard tonight mention that the fire codes and things like that, that the fire department has absolutely nothing to do with single-family dwellings. They don't inspect them. They don't look at the plans. They don't do anything, unless it started happening after I left there. They don't do anything with single-family residents. They don't have anything as far as their carbon monoxide detector requirements or anything. So the fire department doesn't know these things are, 1, being built, and 2, being chopped up once they are built and added bunk rooms onto and things like that. So there's no way the fire department's going to be able to keep up with that stuff. And I don't have a problem establishing a committee of people to look into this, but I think the committee needs to be a balanced committee. I think it needs to be a balanced committee in the fact that maybe get a couple of people that we are knowing are having issues on this committee so they can give you their side of the story. If a committee is made up of just the people that have a financial interest in this thing, of course it's going to come to us where the maximum amount of people that you can have in anything is going to be 100. So, let's just go ahead and be real with this, and let's have both sides of this set down and try to come together with some sort of something that's fair to be able to bring to us to be able to work out. And I don't know, I'm not saying that we have pro-rental and anti-rental people together, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying people with open minds that can sit down and talk about these issues and come to the city council with some kind of realistic expectations. And coming to us saying that a minimum of 8 parking spaces on a 2,000 square foot home, we understand that's not going to happen. We're not going to get that many, but we can come and say you need a parking space for every bedroom that you got or something like that. So these things are if we put a committee together that only has the interest of the short-term rental people together, it's not going to be a true anything that comes to us. So I don't know how we're going to establish this committee, but I think we need to do a little research into the actual committee and who we want to sit on the committee and who it is that is going to bring us these recommendations. So it's a long process. I think it's going to be it's just the way it's got to be.
Save it for the committee, Tuffy.
When are we going? What are we going? Well, I can promise you, fine people probably rather have anybody but me on there. But anyway.
Well, with this said, city manager and staff, what sort of direction do you need at this point? Because it sounds like at least several of us. Do I have consensus that there is an interest in establishing a committee to look into this? Okay, so we do have consensus. If you guys can pull together some sort of numbers, how we might select members, the composition, because I think we need residents, we need people that are non-renting residents, as in the permanent residents, but I think we all, like you said, a very even balance, however that might be done.
I know exactly what residents to select.
No, don't do that. Rental? It'll just be a war. Let's don't do that.
So, do you need further direction, or you guys?
No, ma'am. We'll go ahead and put something together, bring before council, so that you can go through the nomination process to create a advisory board.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you all so very much. And with nothing else, meeting's adjourned.